In this video, we are going to learn about equivalent fractions. What is an equivalent fraction? When you hear or see the word equivalent, what do you think of? This first part, equa, looks and sounds a little bit like equal. That's what equivalent means, equal. Let's look at the fraction exploration you did earlier. On the first page, you shaded in 1/2, then 2/4, 3/6, 4/8, 5/10, and 6/12. Even though these are all different fractions, they show the same amount. Equivalent fractions are just two different fractions that describe the same amount. Let's look at the circles. 1/2 is the same amount as 2/4. 2/4 is the same amount as 3/6. 3/6 is the same amount as 4/8. And 4/8 is the same amount as 5/10. 5/10 is the same amount as 6/12. And we could keep going. These fractions are all different names for the exact same amount. That makes them equivalent fractions. And it's the same thing with the number lines. These fractions are all the same distance. So 3/6 starting from 0 going to 3/6 is the same distance as 4/8 is from 0, 5/10, and 6/12. This is why we can say they are equivalent fractions. They are the same amount. Let's look at some fraction bars. There's 1/2. And now we'll go ahead and show some thirds. 1/3 is less than 1/2. If I put one more third piece, I go more than 1/2. So 2/3 is greater than 1/2. There isn't a fraction with 3 as a denominator that's equal or equivalent to 1/2. Now let's think about fourths. We already know that 2/4 is equal or equivalent to 1/2. Here's 1/5, 2/5, and 2/5 is just a little less than 1/2, and then we get to 3/5, and 3/5 is greater than 1/2. So there's not a fraction amount with fifths that is equivalent to 1/2. We're always either going to be less than 1/2 or greater than 1/2. Let's go on to sixths. How many sixths equal 1/2? There's 1/6, 2/6, 3/6. Which makes sense. If you have 6/6 that equal a whole, we can divide 6 by 2, which means that we can find the halfway point of 6. If you think about 6 divided by 2, that equals 3. So 3 pieces are equivalent to 1/2. 3/6 is equivalent to 1/2. It's the same amount. I don't have sevenths, but we do have eighths. Again, you can think about how many pieces does it take to make a whole? If we're working with eighths, it would take 8 pieces. So what is 8 divided by 2? 8 divided by 2 is 4. So instead of needing all 8 pieces, we just cut it in half there, and that will equal 4/8. So 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4/8. 4/8 is equivalent to 1/2. Let's go ahead and show that with tenths. What is 10 divided by 2? 5. So instead of needing all 10 pieces, we only need 5 pieces. 5/10 is equivalent to 1/2. And I know that 12 divided by 2 is 6. 6 is half of 12. So we just really need 6 pieces. So 1/12, 2/12, 3/12, 4/12, 5/12, 6/12. 6/12 is equivalent to 1/2. 1/2 is such a common amount. It is really helpful if you can memorize those fractions that are equivalent to 1/2. So let's go ahead and just do a little activity to practice those fraction amounts that are equivalent to 1/2. All right, 1/2 is equal to how many fourths? If you got 2/4, that is correct. 1/2 is equivalent to how many sixths? 1/2 equals 3/6. 1/2 equals how many eighths? 1/2 equals 4/8. 1/2 equals how many tenths? 1/2 equals 5/10. 1/2 equals how many twelfths? 1/2 equals 6/12. Let's mix them up. 1/2 equals how many eighths? 4/8. Good job. 1/2 equals how many fourths? 1/2 equals 2/4. Awesome. 1/2 equals how many tenths? 1/2 equals 5/10. 1/2 equals how many sixths? 3/6. Great job! Now you know what an equivalent fraction is and what fractions are equivalent to 1/2.